All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard the Bright Star for your 75-minute architecture river cruise. Just a brief safety announcement before we get underway. The Bright Star is the United States Coast Guard Inspector, passenger vessel. Please remain and exceed all safety requirements on board. In a highly unlikely event of emergency, the Bright Star is equipped with 350 adult, 110 children's life vests that will be distributed by the crew in case of emergency. While underway, we do ask that you don't leave yourself or any of your personal belongings over the side of the boat. No standing or kneeling the seats or the benches, and absolutely no smoking or vaping on board. Feel free to stand up, move out the vessel as you please. Just be mindful of those around you. Try not to block the view of others. Please do not let children move out the vessel unattended. The stairway back aft leads to the lower level. In lower levels where you find additional seat. You can also find our heads or restrooms. They'll be on the starboard or the right-hand side of the boat, currently dockside. Men's head first, ladies second. Moving forward, just past the bar. Jamie is your bartender. Jamie has a full service bar on board. You can make sure every type of big drink you need, beer, wine, soda, chips, pretzels, bottled water, coffee, tea, and a few souvenirs as well. That bar is card only, but feel free to visit the bar at any time during the tour. Other than that, we just ask that if you must take a personal phone call or want to have a loud conversation, in respect for everyone around you listen to the tour, respect for your docent and guide Joe, we ask that you do so on the lower level. Other than that, I'll be handing the mic over to your docent and guide Joe. Let's go for a full round.
Hey everybody, how we doing? Okay, all right, yeah. I will take that as well for a Thursday afternoon. It's amazing, fun. Yeah, we're gonna make something out of that. Folks, my name's Joe. I'm gonna be your docent, your guide. I really like that word. I think it's a good description for what we're doing. Yeah, before we get started, we still have a minute or two until like last couple passages, but I figured if we could talk a little bit about what it is that we're going to be doing. And I'd like to start by telling you guys that we're currently floating about half a mile away from one of the largest collections of Impressionist art in the world. That's actually the Art Institute over on Mission Avenue. Maybe a few of you have already seen that place. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Art Institute, heard of it? Okay, good, awesome. It's right off here off this avenue, Michigan Avenue. On the way down, there's this huge building with these iron cast lines on the outside. That's where I was about a month ago. And I remember I was looking at a Van Gogh, and at one point I picked up my eyesight and I looked around and I could see people just doing their own thing, looking at the different sculptures and looking at the different drawings. And it got me asking myself a very simple question. Why do we do this? Why do we go to museums? What gets us out of our way to go to a place where there's art, where there are these sculptures and pieces and expressions of other people's creativity and what they're going through? This, what we're about to do, this shared experience in itself, is in a living, breathing museum of art setting. This thing changes as time goes by. This room is going to be a gallery, and just like the people that work at a museum, for instance, what I get to do is kind of give you guys a little go on what we have around us. Now that explains kind of what we're doing. But what about you guys? What are you guys doing? That's what I think is really interesting. I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to ask you guys that question. If you want, I encourage you to ask yourself today, why did you come here? What are you doing on this boat? What brought you here? What do you want to see? What do you want to feel? Why are you on this trip now? Maybe you ask yourself these questions, maybe you get some answers, maybe you get more questions instead. All of it works. Maybe you just came here because you want to do a boat ride at 3 in the afternoon on a Thursday. I am for it. Alright? We're here to enjoy ourselves first and foremost. But if you do dig a little bit, if you find something to latch onto and maybe talk about, or not, we'll see. What I'm going to do in the meantime is talk to you guys about some of the buildings that ignite my passions, my interests, my fires. We're going to have ourselves a good time. It's going to be about 75 minutes worth of some great info on this fantastic city that we call Chicago. We're going to hit all 3 branches. We're going to take 3 breaks just to make sure we have a chance to process and a chance for me to just go and say hi to you guys. And speaking of me, because I like to, I should probably tell you a little bit about myself before we get started, so I'm not just some random, handsome tour guide throwing facts in Chicago out here. Like I said, my name is Joe. I also go by Sig. I've been in Chicago for about 6 years now. I'm an Argentine American. I was raised in the Midwest. That explains my accent. And I've had the privilege of guiding groups like yourselves for the past decade or so in 3 different continents. Anyways, that's a little bit about me. Can't wait to meet more about you guys. You all ready? Yes. Love that. Let's get started nice and easy with this white building on your right-hand side. That's the Wrigley Building. That was the first skyscraper put up on the river. It was finished in 1921. Every time I look at this, my eyes go straight to the top. You're going to find these very intricate details and ornamentation. Everything's handcrafted, classical themes of beauty. By classical, I mean Eurocentric. That makes sense, because this building has a heavy European influence to its design. After all, that clock tower is inspired off of the bell tower of a cathedral, La Giralda, that was in Seville. This is a great example of something called Spanish revivalism in the early 20s. But that tells a story. In the early 1920s, America was a young country, and it was trying to prove to the world that it could make beautiful architecture. Now, it didn't have a way of expressing its own originality yet, but that would come later. But check it out, here's another example. 1921, go across the bridge. There's this building with a curb on the opposite side. That's the London Guarantee from 1923. Balustrades, limestone, up top, repetitive, beautiful columns with flourished capitals. That piece at the very top, that outdoor piece, that's called a tempietto. This is a great example of a collection style. It's called Beaux-Arts. It's French for fine arts. 1920s. And between these two buildings, you got kind of a glimpse of what we were trying to achieve. You know, just the fact of getting noticed, right? And trying to find what would be our own expression. And eventually we get there. I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. But we'll bring this conversation. Ahead of us, we're going to shift gears, and we're going to talk about the Trump Tower, which is the second tallest building in Chicago. First in 2009. I want you guys to look at the patios, because there's a little bit of detail here. There's three of them. This first patio right here is at the same height as the Wrigley building we were just discussing. The second patio does the same thing, but this time across the river. There's a building that looks like a wedding cake. That meets the same height of the second patio. The last patio in this building does this as well, but with the building directly on the other side, which is the AMA project, black box building. This kind of design, this resource, is what we call contextualism. It comes from the late 80s, and it's all about making features that are specifically designed for location. But the idea behind this is that it helps it become relevant. Okay, let's make it simple. What if you design a building? No matter what you do with that building, it's going to look different than more than other buildings around it, right? Details like this that go a long way into making that thing a part of its landscape and not just stand out for the sake of it. You'll see this a lot. Come with me, let's go to the left. Let's talk about this one. So this is called the Jewelers Building. 1926, it was a high-tech office space where people sold jewelry. You guys might even recognize this from the occasional Batman movie, or Transformers. It was in both of them. Now, you have these beautiful themes on the exterior. This is Italian, this is Roman. In fact, that dome at the top, that is Italian Renaissance. Those water towers, today they're decorative. They were originally part of the fire suppression system, which made them really stand out back in the day, because they were taking active measures. Iconic. Speaking of iconic, go to your right-hand side. Get your eyes up, put your cameras up, go this way. Get your breath. And take a look at this view. You're going to see two of the most iconic photographed buildings in the city. This is called Marina City. These two twin towers that you see here were finished in 1964 by Bertram Goldberg, a guy who had this as his idea to get people to live in downtown at a time where that was impossible. Downtown Chicago in the 60s, this was industrial, it was factories, it was shipyards, it was railroads, it wasn't a place to live. So, Goldberg put this thing, and it stood out with a sore thumb in all the best ways. People started moving in. 4 years afterwards, finished a complex around the building to make this place into a local culture. Here you're going to find a marina for residents. You're going to find restaurants. You're going to find valet parking in each tower. There's a gym. There's a shopping center. There's a mini mart. There's a movies here. There's a theater here. There's a bowling alley. There's an office space. I hope that you get the point. Above all of it, you can live here. And each one of these apartments has these uniquely shaped low boundaries. Goldberg's pretty unique for this kind of style, and we're going to see more of them. Come with me, let's go to the left. Let's talk about some more iconic designs. There's a building over here with royal white columns, and silver reflective glass. Put your eyes on the columns for me, and I'll follow them to the top. And up there, you're going to find a roof on a Greek temple. All of the inspiration for this design is perfect. And this was actually done by incredible people in 1992. It's a Babylonian design, and in fact, some of his artwork is in the ground floor of the state. I would recommend the galleries. But the building is using materials that are common from the 90s, late 80s. All stone, it's glitzy, it's glam, but it's clearly inspired off of something much more antique, like this. There's this whole rejuvenation of antique styles of architecture in the late 80s, early 90s. This was called neo-classic. If you look straight down, you got good people hanging out in the train tab enjoying the Riverwalk. Y'all, this is one of my favorite things y'all working on the river. This Riverwalk has helped change the dynamic of relationship that everyone has with the water. It's been doing that since 2016. This was an idea thought of long ago, but executed in 2016 by Carol Ross Barney. speaking of this concept of having different rooms, it's part of this thing. The idea in Chicago now is that every new building on this Riverwalk has to leave 30 feet of room for more river, right? So for example, this next part, this is the river here. And if you stay going to the diagonal, on your left, you're going to see the jeweler's building. Excuse me, the builder's building from 1927. It's this one that has 2/3 classical, but then there's this clear black line and 1/3 much newer between. So, the name comes from the fact that this place used to be an office space for construction companies. But if you look at the side on the back, that near the third, that comes in 1986, 60 years later. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to put a different building there so they could split the land. So instead they annexed. What I want y'all to notice and to compare is how the new side respects the original design. Look at the placements of the windows. Compare them from one side to the other. Or go to the top left-hand corner. You see those beautiful traditional columns. You go to the right-hand side. There's a needed updated version. This is just one way of respecting your architectural heritage, which is kind of nice. It's this idea that it doesn't keep that. As you get older, you change your identity, but as that evolves, you find ways to get onto your roots, right? Here's another example. The Wells Street Bridge this one ahead of us. Look at this. Rusted bolts, exposed lampposts, intricate craftsmanship on the ironwork on the handrails. Doesn't this thing look amazing for its age? It should. It's only 11 years old. And this is a replica of the 91-year-old bridge that's being built. You guys, I'm going to ask you all a lot of questions. It's going to be, it's going to be good. Trust me. And speaking of good, to your right, guys, gals, non-binary gender pals, look at the merchandise part. Look at the size of this thing. Mid-1920s. Get your eyes into those windows all the way up. Dramatic setbacks at the top. Polished limestone. Precise repetitive patterns. Geometric shapes. Metal ornamentation. This is called Art Deco. Let me hit the pause button. Remember today when I told you that America was trying to find a way to express what people see in those 1980s? This was their first attempt. So from the mid-1920s, it was a wall of opulence and airplanes, amongst other things. Here's an example. Put your eyes on those precise cuts around the geometric shapes of the ground floor. Think of this. Up until then, everything that was considered beautiful was handcrafted, European, classical influence, right? And this is a whole different approach. That's made by precise American machines doing the same thing over and over again. It talks about values of efficiency, repetition, speed. You guys get my point, but it's just a first attempt to try to express something. It's kind of what architecture can do. It's an expression after all. It's a form of art, although it's much more expensive than the art, I guess. Go straight ahead. Welcome to Wolf Point. Take a look around you. 360 degrees of amazing views. South branch is that way. North branch is this way. We're on the main branch. Now, ahead of us is River Point from 2017. This building that looks like a McDonald's apple pie box. See that? So, this thing is impressive because of the challenges it overcame to be where it is. It's not supposed to be here. It was very hard. There was a railroad line, which is still here to this day. It's the challenge. On that side of the river, all of this was mainly railroads. Now, the way that they worked around it was to create this platform that you see here, this white wall where these vents are, that contains the trains. But then you're not done. You still have to put a building on top of it. So you have to find a way to put your foundations in place. Foundations, in this case, they're called caissons. That means stakes and arms. Here's what gets interesting. Let's go. See that brick wall arch? That's a symbol. You have to find a way to move those caissons into angles so it's going to be built. It's very spiral. And that's a part of another architects. It's a Spanish architect. If you want to see one, there's one in Milwaukee about an hour and a half away. Or if anybody's from my hometown, or has been to my hometown, you know, say this. There's a very famous bridge that he did there too. And speaking of bridges, go to your right hand side. That is the 1908 landmark bridge. And it stays like this only way. We don't use it anymore because the railroads are sometimes. But this bridge is going to explain to us how all the bridges in the city work. They're all, what you guys can see, that this is a seesaw, like it's kids' kids, right? This huge tunnel here in the back. Everyone's over this, there's a tunnel vestibule. The idea is that that tunnel is 3 times as heavy as the structure. So, since it does most of the work, you don't need a lot of strength from motors to actually do the work. In fact, the motors are pretty small, about 100 horsepower. It's not a lot. Now, every bridge in the city works this way, and they all get elevated in just about a minute. On the opposite side of it is this big building, full floors. That's the oldest painting on the river. It's finished in 1898. Originally, this thing did not have a single window on it. Very different purpose. It's a 19th century model. One of the very, very nice, possibly. Anyways, I'll tell you about this on the way back. I want you to focus on the property next door. Look at those triangular-shaped river cottages. Those were also done by Harry Weiss. And put your eyes on the triangles. I want to tell you a story here. This is funny. In his free time, Weiss is a sailor. That's his favorite hobby. And you can see how that hobby leads into his inspiration. Those triangles represent sails of a sailboat. Circular windows, those are full quarters of a ship. This is an example of those modern. The 80s had a whole way of design that was about rebelling against what was the norm. And it was anything but subtle. Exaggerating designs, telling you exactly what was represents. This was a big gamble. It's in the late 80s, where we are now. This North Parish was not nice. It wasn't safe. It wasn't clean. Nobody would live here. The covers were okay. But it's funny how these things go back. How they change. You know, the last one of these Ford, it sold in 2015. And it went for $2.25 million. Yeah. Guys, buckle up. I'm going to give you numbers all day. We're going to figure out how much we need. We've got a mortgage going. But think about this. That was 1988, right? Over there is a piece of baseball from 1980. It's a fitness club. Right? It was before that set of houses, right? And what you're looking at here is the back side of the club. It has its back on the river. In fact, originally, this wall didn't have a single window on it. Because again, why would you want to see the river? It's not clean, it's not nice. But these things change, especially if you work on them. The city changes its relationship to the river. And 21 years after they finished this, in 2001, the demand to live here was so high that the Kinsey townhouse development on the left was completely sold out before the bricks even hit the ground. Yeah. More on this later. But for now, we are 18 minutes into our tour. This is a great time to stop. Time for our first break, everybody. That was a lot. So, good chance to stretch those legs, go to the bathroom, and go visit Jamie. He sent me a text. He's bored. So, go get yourself a drink from him. Maybe a nice time for vodka lemonade. Who's here to judge? I'm not. I'm going to see you guys in a minute. Feel free to talk to me if you'd like to, and thank you for listening. Thanks. Y'all ready? Cool, let's keep going. So today, we talk about these little triangles on your right. I want to talk about the pink building next door. Now, the Fulton House originally was not a place to live. It was a cold storage freezer for the meatpacking industry. Back in the 1800s, that was a big industry in Chicago. So I want you to imagine this place completely made of brick with two openings, which were the doors and the ground floor. While you do that, put your eyes on the balconies. Now, those balconies are going to tell you how thick that outer wall is, because this was a challenge. To get started here, they had to let this building thaw out first. That took 6 months. And then when they carved through the walls, they found matted horsehair and cork. That's what they used mainly as insulation. So today, it's a very desirable residential little spot. You imagine it does really well holding this temperature. See on the right, look at its neighbor, River Bend, much more modern from 2004. It has this curve that elegantly goes into the river. And if you follow that curve, it'll take you next door to River Point. And notice how these transitions from one curve to another are kind of seamless. It's nice. Both of the buildings, the arches, they have the exact same radius between the doors. But that's interesting because that means that's a real big choice. Comes much later, it's choosing to borrow this design feature from its neighbor. Why? There's a lot of answers to it. I like to think that when you start copying features in space, you start to create a functional unit. You create harmony. Both of these buildings are copying the first building that did that here. Go to your left. Look, coming into view is the New Bean building from 1983. Now it was first placed on a curved piece of land, so it curves. The green glass is for the water below. The blue glass is for the sky. This thing acts as a mirror for the city. And that's what contextualism, this way of designing things, is all about. It's about being a part of your environment, whatever that looks like. Now to your left, that is an amazing photo of downtown Chicago. Usually it's my favorite photo of downtown Chicago, but what makes it even more special is the clouds going across some of the skyscrapers. That's kind of nice. And over to your right, another marvel of engineering. Look at this building in the shape of a Y. Check this out. So, over 700 feet tall. Clearly it's big, but the base is only 39 feet wide. Folks, that's about 1.5 times wider than the boat. It's not a lot. Now, buildings like this, they have to deal with something that I usually forget about because of my height. The wind. Think about it. Tall buildings, their number one force that they have to deal with isn't gravity, it's actually wind. It exudes a lot of force from buildings. So architects, engineers have to be creative to deal with the forces of wind. That's called managing sway, right? Now this little thin base that you see here, that's not an aesthetic choice, that's a solution to a bigger problem, but I'll tell you about that later. The interesting thing here is that this building manages sway with a very, thank you, that's great, with an awesome technique, which is on the last floor, there's over 160,000 gallons of water acting as a shock absorber to the wind. So, as the wind pushes against this building all day, the water in those tanks, it moves at a slower rate. But it absorbs the impact of the wind and then gently pushes in the opposite direction. If the building would normally do this, it ends up just settling a lot easier. It's called tune/damping. Where this fine gentleman's walking up there, that's their extension of the river walk. And every building has to do this once you're new on the river. That's what's happening here. It's also happening across the river. Look, Bank of America building. These nice blue vertical steps into the river. There's a lot of cool things going on here, but this building, which was finished in 2018, makes room for the Riverwalk by removing the first 3 floors altogether. The building is supported by 3 sets of tripods. The offices start as of the 3rd floor. And one of the best things it does is an optical illusion. Check this out. So, if you guys look at the last couple of floors in this building, right, and you compare that last floor to the sky above it, to the sky around it, it gives you the illusion that the building becomes invisible. And I like that, because one of the things that they're trying to communicate with a design like this is how important it is to remind us that as you look at the building makes you look at everything else, right? It's part of something bigger, it's part of a city. And architecture can do that. It can be an expression of values, it can be an expression of what's important for a whole society. It tells a story. Check it out, this next one on your left, right? For example, that's the Senate Opera House, 1929, a time of wealth, a time of opulence, a time of enjoying yourselves. Why not make a place for opera? Now, this is an iconic shape, it's beautiful, that's the back side of the building. The cushion of the chair that you see here is the Opera House. However, can anybody tell me what happened in 1929 that affected everybody in the world? Great Depression, the crash, that's right. This was finished 2 weeks after the Great Depression, and eventually followed from bankruptcy in 1932. And America went on a hiatus of making commercial buildings altogether. We didn't pick that up until the late 50s, early 60s. That was almost 30 years later. And when those commercial buildings came back, they didn't look like this. They looked like that. And if you look at this black box building next door, you see these anodized beams, circular windows, and there's a big, beautiful baby plaza around the building. So look, this to that. The whole idea is that this kind of design, it's kind of modernism, we call it black box modernism. It's this whole way of making these buildings was created here in Chicago. It was led by Rudolf Mies van der Rohe, who's a German designer who lived his life here in Chicago. But what you see here are these two sister box buildings, right? And they're a reflection of their time in their own way. See, Van der Rohe, he was obsessed with the idea that less is more. He would rather be good than be interesting. And these buildings, they reflect that. The number one priority here isn't what the building looks like. It never was. It's what the building is for. So these are offices. Van der Rohe considered, hey, to make an office, all I need is a cubicle. This is one cubicle after the other, precise, predictable, rational, cheap, easy to make. But it also makes sense because of a lot of other things. It's the 60s in America. It's a time of a busy country, the space race, putting down on the moon, Cold War. Think that the people that designed this were probably somewhere between their 30s and their 50s. They were children at some point that were raised during the Great Depression. They grew up poor. They knew where to spend their money. It wasn't anything on the outside of the building. Right? But in the 70s, look how things shift. Right-hand side, that white building with the concrete. We're still making boxes, but now they look smoother, elegant, inviting, warmer, successful, because this way of making commercial buildings in the 70s was such a big deal that you could copy and paste it across the world. This was known as the international style. A good example of this were the original Twin Towers in New York. And then everything changes in the 80s with that last building on your right-hand side. Look at the one with the curve, with the glass that's domed outwards. It kind of gives you a distorted image. There's this big jump in technology to shape and mold glass communities that allow people to do things like this. Also, it's a time of breaking away from box space. It's a time of globalization, seeing other markets, seeing yourself. Here's what I'm talking about. These last four buildings, they're all representations of what was important, what was going on when they were being built. And sometimes your circumstances, they kind of determine what you can and can't make. Does that track? Does that make sense? Dope. Thank you for following me on that little topic. Okay. Let's go to some more fun things. Okay, this short building here. So that's the Mid-America Commodities Exchange. I call it the Xbox building, easy to remember. This is a very small space, and in order to optimize the space, they went with these exoskeletons on the outside. They're transferring and doing most of the load bearing. That allows for open floor plans with less structural columns. Also, I'm just a big fan that there's a corner bakery next to a fitness formula club. That's brilliant marketing. Over to your left, speaking of marketing, look at this building. It's from the 70s. Nobody cared about it. So in 2014, that's when they put this mural here. Look at the mural. It's a map of the Chicago River system. It's actually done to scale. That red Lego brick is this building on the river. It's a $800,000 You Are Here. Cool. Yeah. Now, over to your right-hand side, our iconic Old Main Post Office. So this was finished in 1932. When it was done, it was the largest post office in the world, and it was put to good use here, thanks to companies like Marshall Fields, Montgomery Woods, Sears. All these companies, they sent their mail over catalogs to this place. They do over 7 billion pieces of mail on the day. You might recognize this side as Gotham Shoreline. You've seen The Dark Knight, right? 2007, Joker, Batman. Okay, so that movie was filmed in Chicago, but the first scene was right here. Now, when we filmed the scene, the building was empty. Today, this is an office building. We recycled it entirely for the companies that you see here. Big chip companies, big names. Now, they do a good job recycling the space. They do a good job of maintaining the infrastructure. Speaking of, this is a big part of Chicago, not just the post office, but what's going on with this bridge. So that bridge, Congress Parkway, is actually a bridge to Interstate I-90. It's a national highway right here. And that runs right through the building from one side to the other. That's how both of these things were designed to work. Now, there's a lot of really interesting things about Chicago's history when it comes to design, especially urban design. But one of the things that they're doing now that I think is awesome is on the roof of that building. So the roof itself is a 3.5-acre rooftop garden. You can't really tell how big this is from the single. I'm going to show it to you later on. But that building, it has things to do with people that live here, which is great. But also, it has bushes, trees that are all considered beehive homes. And those who colonize the city. And it's been investigated. It turns out that Chicago leads the nation with green roofs on top of its buildings. We have over 700 of them. And what this means is that all of these little green spaces at different heights, they help collectively bring down the temperature of the city. It's what's known as a passive cooling effect. It helps circulate air. You kind of got to keep that in mind when you've got cities this big. And how do we get this big? Well, there's a little bit of history to that. This is a good spot to tell that history. So where we are right now, everybody, is a very important part of the city. This is where the Chicago fire happened over 150 years ago. That's before and after the storm. The fire happened in 1871. But I have to tell you, the reason why it was so important here, the effects of the fire, is because this was the fastest growing city in the world at the time. Anything that was a good activity, that was progress, that was work, was happening in Chicago. All right, so if the fire happens here, years before it, there was a lot going on. In 1848, we made the Illinois-Michigan Canal. That's the waterway that connects Lake Michigan to the Mississippi that made this city into a port city. In the 1850s, we opened up the railroad stations and yards that we have here. We turned the city into a railroad hub. Anything that was on trains had to pass to Chicago. In 1864, we opened up the stockyards on the south side of the city, making us the cow and hog butcher to the world. Any kind of activity that was worth doing at that time was happening here. So everybody was moving to Chicago. We saw our population triple. We were at 112,000 people. We went to 350,000 people in less than a decade. So, naturally, city planners, they have to build buildings and spaces for these people to live. They gotta do it quick, they gotta do it cheap. Nothing is more available at that time than wood. Simple resource. And this whole neighborhood on the left-hand side, which was the South Loop, was completely made of wood. Cabins, cottages, lodges, ranches, you name it. Even the sidewalks were made out of wood slots, put together. Now the fire didn't happen here, it spread here. It actually started on that side. There was a barn that belonged to Mrs. Catherine O'Leary, a migrant Catholic Irish woman. And on October 8th, 1871, a fire broke out. This was a Sunday night. It happened at 9 p.m. and nobody knows how or why. But the fire was met with winds of 25 miles per hour in a city that was going through a drought. And that fire blows up quickly, out of control. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. The fire had crossed the river, and the wind had bustled it into making fire tornadoes ripping through the city. In 32 hours, 1/3 of Chicago was leveled. Let's put this on a map. Okay, so for context, has anybody had a chance to walk on Michigan Avenue yet? Yeah, a couple yeses, okay, good. Has anybody gone north and found something that looks like a castle in the middle of the road? Okay, cool, so that's called the water tower. It's this thing that literally looks like it's made of stone. It is. It's one of the few structures that survived a fire. Now that's 3.5 miles away from where we are. But here to there, everything burned. 18,000 buildings. Gone in less than 2 days. People were furious. The city blamed Mrs. O'Leary. It was unfair, that's what they did. Social justice was very powerful. Indulge me for a second. You see on the right-hand side, there's a radio antenna. An average radio antenna 2 blocks away from here behind a parking structure. Okay, nothing special about it. That is where the Chicago Fire Academy is today. That's where they train new recruits of firefighters to be the best in the city. Guess what was there before? Mrs. O'Leary's blind. Yeah, social justice, poetic, quick, a little bit over the top. Chicago realized as a city we were wrong to do that. Eventually, we legally, publicly exonerated Mrs. O'Leary. That took time. That happened in 1998. Now that's Chicago bureaucracy, guys. Come on. But here's the story. I talk about the fire because this place was already successful for everything I told you about. That wasn't going to change. Some people saw crisis. Other people they saw opportunity. Especially young architects, guys who need to make a name for themselves. They brought all the creative ideas here. And so, Chicago quickly turns around. In a matter of 10, 12 years, we start doing things that have never been done before. Not only does the city rebuild, we become the home to the world's first skyscraper made out of steel framing. Most of these buildings back then were made of bricks. And bricks, you can only build so high until you have to stop because you can't keep adding more brick. You won't be able to load. The steel framing allowed you to make literally frames of steel that can make them taller, lighter, and faster than a brick building. And we were the first city doing that. It's not just a city rebuilding itself, it's a city telling everybody else how things are going to be built moving forward. We kept on hitting number ones after that. We got to be America's host of the first World Fair Columbian Exposition that went in 1893. That was a big deal because we weren't supposed to, but we ended up outbeating or outvoting the prime candidate to host that. Fun fact, that's where Chicago gets its nickname as the Windy City. It has nothing to do with the wind. New York didn't like the fact that we were chosen to be the host. So the New York Times said that we had won thanks to those hot windbag politicians that windy city of Chicago. It's actually an insult to the city. To call somebody windy is to call somebody arrogant. Anyway, folks, that's a lot of me talking. Let's take a break. Silence for your ears. A beautiful photo on your phone is on your left-hand side. And a good time to go get yourself a drink from my friend Jamie is just downstairs. I'll see you guys in a minute, all right? Especially after the World Fair in 1909, one of the lead architects that emerged from that field was Howard. And in that year, 1909, we decided to see Chicago. That's something that was about the city. It's 50, 60, 70 years of history. Vernon was inspired by the opportunities here. How this place could be a commercial success in the middle of the prairie. He wanted to start off by simple organizing. For example, the way Chicago is presented is in a grid. And it's from that plan of 1909. Grids are simple to manage, easy to expand, easy to navigate. But think about the big things of infrastructure that happened here. America's first double-decker road was in Chicago. That's Upper and Lower Wacker. That's up by the river. You guys see that? Trucks at the bottom, cars on top. It's a nightmare. But there are other huge things here. Like, for example, that post office, which now you can see how big it really is part of that 1909 plan. The highway running through it, that was Burnham's idea. He had already foreseen the idea of the need for workers like that for Chicago was the country. Those guys used that. Highways didn't have Americans in the 60s. Burnham was also this big proponent of an idea called the City Beautiful movement. He believed that if your city was beautiful, classically designed, you would have citizens that were inspired, living their best versions of themselves. That was a movement. We had notions that to make this balanced out, we would invent these big, green, inviting spaces. And some of them are still here. Grant Park in the middle of downtown is from that 1909 plan. Buckingham Fountain, the water fountain, one that's one of the largest ones in the world, is from that plan. Baby Piers from that plan. The Riverwalk I've been boasting about. It was inspired off the Riverwalk of the Seine in the 1800s. Burnham was a guy who thought of natural beauty as his #1 weapon to help do that. But anyways, we can talk more about it later. Let's get distracted. Look at your right-hand side. Look at this building. Look at this design. Does that seem familiar to any of you? Yeah, there you go. Right. So this was also Goldberg, the same guy who did those twin towers that we were talking about earlier today. He did this 20 years later in the 80s. You got the marina below, commercial spaces, and then people that live on top of it all. However, notice that this time the people that live in the water, their balconies are closed. That has to do with living perfectly in an area with a lot of water. Okay? This building is curiously designed like an S, like a snake. Now the inside curve over here, you're going to notice that there are some open air balconies. And then they can have those balconies because this protects them from strong mineral winds. It's got a design. Now, Goldberg, he was a fan of using organic shapes in his designs. He had this notion that since there are no right angles in nature, this building should have as few as possible. This was called curvilinear modernism. Maybe you guys can tell, but between these two blocks, there's actually 2 blocks of buildings. There's a west side and an east side. Look straight ahead. We got some skyscrapers to talk about. Over to your left, the BMO Harris Tower that opened in 2022. What I like about it is the fact that this is part of a bigger plan. The idea is to expand the high-rising skyline to the west. That's the west loop, by the way, everybody. And there's this whole study that proves that if you put a skyscraper in a place where there are none, more will eventually follow. That's the whole incentive, and the tax incentive too. Swing all the way to the right-hand side. Short building here, black building, gray balconies, white outline. That's a contemporary style of design. It's called slice minimalism. I call it the file kind of building, because that's what they look like. Remember this, we're going to come back to it. The right-hand side, Art Deco building with the statue on top of it. That is none other than the Board of Trade of Chicago. Very famous because of Batman movies, but if you see The Bear, season 2, it's in that show. Now, this was made in the 1930s. It's iconic Art Deco design. That was a hard thing to do. Consider the Depression had already had its effect on everything. Yet they managed to finish this building. It was one of the tallest buildings. It was the tallest building in the city for about 30 plus years. The statue up top, it represents Ceres, Roman goddess of agriculture, and that represents the main activity of the building, trading agricultural futures. She looks north down LaSalle Street. LaSalle Street starts against that building. Very dramatic, very awesome at night. And speaking of night and dark, let's talk about tall, dark, handsome, tube-light antennas right ahead of us. Look at the size of this thing. That's an icon, a legend of Chicago architecture. That, folks, was the Sears Tower. And that's the only name you need to know today. Good. We understand each other. Let's talk about this thing. This was built in 1974. And when it was finished, it was automatically the largest building, tallest building in the world. And they had that title for 24 years, from 74 to 1998. Nothing was taller than this guy. Now the height has everything to do with the building and nothing to do with the antennas. The antennas don't count. The entire height is 1,451 feet. If you're from anywhere out in the world that's not the US, that's 442 meters. Now, antenna they don't count. I'll tell you more about that later on. But this was named after the Sears company that was made a national powerhouse of retail and commerce. And they had their offices here until the 90s. And then they left, and the building eventually changed ownership because somebody came and rented it. And Chicagoans, we didn't like that because they tried changing the name. We succeeded in changing the name, but nobody here called it anything else. So, let's just get the shortcut. If you want to ask somebody how to get to this building, call it the. There we go. It has to do with wind in the creative way. You see one building, it's made up of 9 columns tied together on a 3x3 grid. This is called tubular construction. The idea is that you get straight from unity. People have thought of this as their column, Bruce Graham. Has anybody happened to see the Hancock Tower? We should have it. Okay, right? Hotel Lee. Around that way. This thing is tremendous. The design is more of that black box modernism, which this is from the mid-70s. Modernism happened in the 60s. That's kind of a nice little nod to the influences in the city. And in this further tour, we're going to talk about how architects pay respect to other landmarks and other architects in the city. Now, the antenna that you got to talk to, they are enormous, but they don't go towards the height of the building. It's too strong. Because antennas extend. In fact, the ones up here, they were changed last year for different reasons. So, if you know the rule, you can also find it. Architects that care about the height of buildings sometimes use that to their advantage. The second tallest building in the city today is the Trump Tower. But it has that title because it has this permanent decorative look on top of it. That, you know, it doesn't mean, that's called a spire. Spires are decorative. They add height artificially. What I mean is, you can make a building taller without continuously having to add more floors to it, right? Okay. Here's a pop quiz, a tough question for the boat. If you know it, good. If you don't, that's okay. That's what we're here for. And if you know it, shout it out. Can anybody tell me where the tallest building in America is today? Bingo. One World Trade Center in New York. Now, One World Trade Center has a height of 1776. But, if I were to take a ruler and measure from the roof of the Sears Tower to the roof over New York, this one is 83 feet tall. The difference is made up by a 408-foot space needle into the sky or a little bit more. And then it's more investigating. It turns out that there's a term for that kind of behavior in architecture. It's called cheating. That's all it is. Anyways, fun story though. The antennas on this building, the Sears Tower, each one of them are roughly the same height as these black boxes on your left-hand side. That's almost 300 feet of height on top. That's impressive. And just to change the subject, let's go to our left-hand side. You're going to see this gray sign with gold letters says Union Station. That's the entrance, or one of many entrances to Union Station, which is the passenger train station. The train station itself can be seen about a block away from here. You see the corner of it. It's a train station. A little bit more of info about myself. I have recently gone down a YouTube rabbit hole on train travel, which is amazing. But third busiest passenger in the area is the country. Amtrak, which is what's based here, has chosen the city as its central point. So if you do travel by train, there's a good chance that you might end up bouncing in down Chicago. Here's the deal. If you look at these tunnels, they are train tunnels. They all lead to Union Station and down to the south side. The challenge is that these trains have been here first. Since forever. Everything you see on top came much later. Now that I told you this, consider that every time you build on top of a train, you have to figure out where you put your caissons, your foundations, right? You have to avoid the railroads below. because you can't interrupt railroad activity. At the same time, once you're finished building it, you don't own the land. Now, the land belongs to Amtrak. You just rent the air above it. And that's where this game works. Renting the air above it. It's kind of a cool way of subsidizing the building. I'll tell you more about this some other time. Now, I want you guys to compare something for you. Today I asked you, why are you here? What do you want to see? What do you want to feel? There's a chance to touch on that thing. On your right, we talked about the Civil Opera House. Right-hand side, 1929 Art Deco style. Consider that is the back of the building on the river. And you compare that to its neighbor and see how you feel about it. Its neighbor's right across the river. It is number 2 Riverside, North Riverside Plaza. This used to be the offices of the newspaper. It was made the same year, 1929. It's the same style, Art Deco. The difference between the two of them is that this one faces the river. Now ask yourself, what do you like more? For me, it's this, for many reasons. This is the first commercial building that decides to move. And that's when that dynamic of the city and the water starts to change. And it starts to get something. This was the first open-air public plaza in the country for commercial buildings. So if you didn't work here in 1929, you could just walk up and hang out, which was something that was uncommon. These carvings, they tell stories. From the evolution of the press, from the hieroglyphics to the Gutenberg press, they have names engraved on the sides. And this is where Joseph Pulitzer wrote. Left-hand side, stay with me. Let's talk about the Bowie building next door, because I want to talk about these white metal beams right here. Do you guys see that on this side of the building? Okay, so all of those beams are connected, one right next to each other, to the top of the building. And they left them exposed so everybody could be impressed by it. They kind of should have. All of those beams, those are the support systems that have weight on the building on the corner towards the building. They knew that going into the space, they wouldn't be able to put a foundation in the corner on the southwest side, because there's a railroad line directly below it. So instead, they decided to support them with weight, right? A series of metal beams all across the top. Think of a fish. What's the weight of a fish? It does this. Similar concept. Creative problems at that and need creative solutions, just like the Y-shaped in this one. Let's talk about the challenges. For 40 years, this land was empty because nobody could figure out how to put a building here and make it worth anyone's while. The land is small. 2/3 of it are taken up by Amtrak railroads. At the same time, you need 30 feet room for the Riverwalk. That leaves you with 20% left of available space. So, the architects here resolved that they would go for that small space in the shape of a wedge. That's 39 feet wide, but that's 120 feet below the ground. And all of that is taking the weight of this tremendous structure that's funneled into it from the sides. All of that weight is pushed into this water, right? And the weight itself is about the equivalent to 26 747 jumbo jet airplanes with passengers. All right. More on this later. Let's change the subject. Couple cool things. And see if the evening is open and we're ready. It's like, oh, it goes a little place to get something to drink. Next place for brunch as well. Let's talk about chocolate. Let's talk about food. Have you guys done the Chicago food yet? You guys done the classics? Good. I've not done the hot dogs. Okay, some yeses. No. Right. So I got a lot of recommendations. No good for recommendation. You guys want to do anything in the city? Let's get out of the car now. Don't get caught. Red and yellow signs or like a red and yellow umbrella, those places sell hot dogs. Now the one that you find looks like it's dirty, dilapidated, like it was recently closed, or that it didn't pass the last health inspection, that's the one. That's where you go. You go there, hear me out, get a quarter-pound Polish dog, right? Ask them for the garden. That's Chicago for everything. And everything here is onions, tomatoes, relish, peppers, mustards, poppy seeds, a slice of pickle, every single thing except what, y'all? Ketchup. No Chicago, no ketchup on Chicago dogs. Don't be a monster, because we will know. What about pizza? Did you guys do the pizza yet? Okay, good, good. Chicago's famous for two types of pizza, really. Stuffed pizza, which is the one that's like a pie that's covered with sauce and Parmesan, and then Chicagoans eat. Only when you guys visit us. Most of the time, we're simple people. We go for taco style pizza. And the other one is deep pan pizza, which is delicious. That's my favorite of it too. In my opinion, the best one in the city is in Rogers Park. It's in JB Alberto's. That's the name of the place. It's amazing, worth your time. Check out places like Pequod's, although that place is famous, but it's really good. It's kind of downtown. Check out, if you want to be in downtown, Uno. They invented deep fish. Check out Louis, right across the street from it. Check out Gino's Feast. I can keep going. If you have gone to Lou Malnati's or Giordano's, you have not failed. You're just victims of late stage capitalism. Really good work. Check out smaller places. I got more recommendations. You got nothing to do tonight? Let me give you some plans. Check this place out. Every night at 9 p.m. and at 10 p.m. you're going to find artwork projected from that projection system onto the face of the merchandise board. Every night, this whole building comes to life. It's called Art on the Mark. It's a lot of fun. It's free. It's a good show. 9 p.m., 10 p.m. A couple cool things to observe here. So, on your right, this is where people gather tonight to watch the show. You can also notice how there's floating gardens on the water. I like that. These gardens, these are fish hotels. So there's a symbiotic relationship here between the plants and the fish. What the fish do is that they feed the plants with their activities, and the plants, they give fish homes. And this helps repopulate the diversity that we need in the world. In the 70s, that's the definition of fish. Right-hand side. Check out these three buildings. How we're related to each other. So, Art Deco, modern, and the Greek Temple, right? Look at the modern cuts, slices. That's another example of slice minimalism. Fine kind of building, similar style. Okay. Now that modern building uses these three patios on the front to relate to its neighbors. The patio closest to us is at the same height of the relief of the Art Deco building before it, but look at the one at the top. It meets the base of the Greek temple on the other side. It's a good challenge. Again, no matter what you make, if it's newer than your neighbors, you have to find ways to make yourself relevant. At least if you do those efforts, it looks spectacular. There's another example. Okay, so the Greek temple's from the 90s, but the neighbor next door is a short building with a number 55 on it. Okay, rough, exposed materials, black defensive windows. That style is known as brutalism. And it was very popular in Europe in the 60s. It didn't do well here. So, the building's from the 60s. Everything around it came afterwards, right? Now look at the Greek temple. And notice how it has these rows that come in pairs. Count with me, 2, 4, and 6. On the 6th row to the left, it's at the same height as the base of the 55 of its neighbor. And then, on the other side of that brown short building, there's this big black and gray building with these, kind of looks like a chess piece. That's the Leo Burnett. You see how it has those corners pulled outwards? Well, in the 80s, at the time of super economic growth, it was very important to have corner offices. When you pull out your corners this way, you quadruple the offices per floor. So it's like having 4, you have 16. Right? Okay. The Leo Burnett building has a black belt at the same height of the base of the 55 before it. And all these details, they're hiding in plain sight. But what they achieve is a sense of harmony. Transitions are seamless. You start here, you go that way. Everything is seamless. It's good design. Come with me. Join me on the left. So this is Marina City. And right on the premise is House of Blues. It's a good place to get a live show. How about you guys? Does anybody see a live show while you're in Chicago? Okay, good. Good for you guys. Yeah, awesome. Consider it, folks, because we've got a really good, strong cultural music scene here. You don't want to go here? Cool. Go to Lakeview. That's a good neighborhood. Check out Kingston Mines. Maybe you want to see Broadway. I totally would if I was you. Chicago has more Broadway premieres than New York does. It's kind of crazy. But here's what I really want to tell you. All of this, Marina City, is done by Goldberg. Goldberg learned his craft from Vanderbilt, the guy who made black boxes. And here you have one right next to each other. And I kind of like this message. You know, you have professor, student, where you learn your craft, modernism, and how you make it yours for the linear mind. Right? Come with me, go to the right-hand side. Let's talk about a formidable building, green with a gold top in the back. All right, so that is the carbon and carbide building. It's an Art Deco building from the 1920s, but it looks very different. You guys have heard me talk about Art Deco. One of the things I always say is that it's covered in limestone, which is beige. It's nice. But this one was made at a time when the prohibition of alcohol, and that didn't go well with Chicagoans. So instead of looking beige, it looks like a champagne bottle. They chose green terracotta, black granite, and that tower is covered in 24 karat gold leaf. Now, Daniel Burnham designed the city, but that building was designed by his sons, which is kind of a fun little twist of fate. The Pendry Hotel is there. This is a good spot to hang out, get yourself a drink with a view of the river. Same with the London House over on your right-hand side. Now, next to the London House is this tall building that looks like an upside-down telescope, which is Mather Tower, from 1928. So, Mather Tower is covered in terracotta. And I wanted to point out that all these buildings after the fire, they were covered in usually three materials: limestone, brick, and terracotta. They were cheap, but more importantly, they were fireproof. So these are what kind of materials that made a big difference in the city. Here's what I want to point out. If you look at Mather Tower, it's covered in individual small tiles of white terracotta. Okay. So that is a tribute, in my opinion. They weren't the first ones to do it, but they respect the people who did. So that comes from 1928. But if you look across the river, you can find what I think is the original inspiration: the Wrigley Building. Now, the Wrigley Building happened first in 1921. That other part that you see there on the left of it, that happened a couple years later, 1924. It's owned by the same company, of course, that gives you Wrigley's Candies, Juicy Fruit Bar, and of course Wrigley Field. Now, the building itself is covered in over 250,000 glazed white terracotta tiles. That goes from 6 shades of white. Generally, the building gets whiter as it gets taller. Cool. On the ground floor, there's this blue tint to the white. Then on the next floor up, there's kind of like a grayish tint to it. Now, the reason why it's white at all is because that has to do with the World Fair that we hosted in 1893. The whole World Fair, its facilities, it was created with model buildings that were all painted white. This is kind of a tribute to the white city of the World Fair. Anyways, that whole building was inspired off of the cathedral. Its neighbor has a similar story. So on your left, coming into view, is the Chicago Tribune Tower, 1925. That's where the newspaper of the same name used to be. The newspaper left in 2018, it's in a different location. And look at this beautiful building coming into view. Look at the crown. So, the crown is inspired off of the Cathedral of the Butter Tower in Rouen, France. You've got these L-shaped bridges. Those are flying buttresses that artificially support the central tower. There's spires, gargoyles, fleur de lis. Beautiful example of French Gothic revivalism. Now, kind of was controversial. It was 1925 when it was turned into Art Deco. And this was a heavy European design. The compromise was European, Art Deco windows. That was one of the reasons why people didn't like this building. I think it's actually one of my favorite. I think that kind of building is so, the penthouse was on the market last year, but it was only for $8.7 million. So we're getting closer to something more affordable. Staying on the left, you're going to see the NBC Tower coming into view on your left-hand side from 1989. It's inspired off of the NBC Tower in New York, which is originally from the 20s. Now, since this is much more newer and more modern, it looks like Art Deco, but they call it Echo Deco. You see those L-shaped bridges? That's a tribute to its neighbor, the Tribune Tower. And everybody, come with me. Let's go to the right-hand side. Second row, white building, white wavy balconies. Do you see that? Good, that's one of my favorite designs for the whole river. That's called Aqua Tower. It was made by Jeannie Gain, Chicago architect. Look at every single one of those balconies go. They all have different curves. And I know that right now you guys can't see it because it's blocked by whatever that is. But I'm going to tell you about it because we're going to see it again. Here's the thing. 2009, Jeannie Gang makes this building. It's mostly residential. It's part hotel. That's where the Radisson Hotel is. And when it's finished, it sells like hotcakes because every curve on the outside of it is unique. Now, the name is Aqua Tower, but the inspiration for the curves are eroding slopes of limestone. You see the brown building, the James Hardy? Look, forget about it. Look behind it. You're going to find the white balconies I'm talking about. Okay. Every single balcony is different from its neighbor. So that means if I stand on one floor, whoever's above me, whoever's below me, they don't have the exact same point of view as I do. They can't. And then I discovered that it's not just beautiful, it's functional. Everything about these things does a different purpose. So the curves, they work breaking forces of wind. The way the light bounces off of them helps avoid birds from flying into the building. But more importantly, on a hot day like this one, all of those curves, they've been positioned in GPS coordinates in an effort to make their shade more efficient. They keep the building cooler, longer, using less electricity, using less air conditioning. This is how you get buildings to be LEED certified. That's an acronym. It stands for Leadership in Environmental Engineering and Design. Jeannie Gang knocked out of the park with this. And then in 2020, she was primed to finish the St. Regis, that blue building on your right hand side. But what you see here is the third tallest building in Chicago. If anybody's looking for some empowerment, that's the tallest building in the world today, made by a woman on architecture. It's from Chicago. Inspiration is like mission. We have greens, there's whites, grays, rhythmic design. Where this cube is, that marks the end of the height of the hotel by the same name. The hotel is the St. Regis. The rest, above it, 293 buildings. Let me ask you guys a couple questions. Very simple, but do you all see the curves? That's all straight lines. This is called stepping. Stepping has a difference of width. It's 4 inches of difference between one floor and the next. The idea is that this helps break the wind and manage it differently. The shape that inspires this is a frustum, which is a weird name for a weird shape, but not to fear. You guys have seen frustums. Has anybody ever had Chinese takeout? Those little white boxes are frustums, and these are frustums right side up, upside down, right side up, upside down. That's what gives you that weird design. More on this later. Right ahead of us is Lakeshore Drive, where these cars are. It's a great way to go north and south of Chicago. It goes 18 miles in length. The full name of this, however, has been renamed. Today we call it Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable Lakeshore Drive. And that name belongs to the first permanent non-native resident who called Chicago home. In the 1700s, Jean-Baptiste was a guy who exiled himself from a life of slavery in Haiti all the way out here. And he saw this marshy swampland and said, why not? In fact, his first trading posts and taverns, they are where the Apple Store is today, which is an historic location. To the other side of it, however, is a beautiful modern building from 1968, Lake Point Tower. You guys can see the features here, right? Black, steel, glass, all that's modern. However, there's curves. This is another good example of curvilinear modernism. Let me think back to this. Remember the black boxes that Van der Rohe made? This was made by two of his students. So again, you see that relationship going on, right? Cheeky guys. There's a reason why that building's legal. And they found a loophole in the zoning right restrictions of Chicago in the 60s. The city later on closed the loophole, and I'm glad they did, because everything on the east of this road was supposed to be free, public, forever. The Chicago lakefront with Lake Michigan is 24 miles long. There's 23 swimming beaches here. That's how much we like this water. And how important it is to keep it safe and clean and free from constant contamination. That lake represents 20% of the world's fresh water supply currently. As your left is David here, that was part of the land of Chicago. The Ferris wheel was made world famous here in Chicago. So that thing today was made by the Dutch Wheel Company, the same ones that do the Eye of London. This has room for 420 people total. But, true story, the Ferris wheel is made famous here. It has to do with the World Fair of 1893. Check this out. Okay, every World Fair back then had to have this huge piece of engineering, something iconic to represent it. Now, before Chicago had a World Fair, in 1889 there was one that was hosted in Paris. And Paris had introduced everybody to the Eiffel Tower. So Chicago's response was to work with George Washington and Gale Ferris, the man who invented the thing, and his first ever Ferris wheel. It was 70 feet taller than this one. It was so big, they used Pullman coach cars instead of these little gondolas. Each one of them could sit 60 people. A total of 2,100 people could spin around the world, as they call it, and nobody wanted to ride it. They'd never seen anything that big move and be safe, right? So Gail Ferris saw the problem and courageously volunteered his wife to take the first trip and proved everyone how successful it was. Anyways, folks, more stories later. Time for our last break. Beautiful photo on your left. Great chance to go see Jamie before he closes out. Better chance to go to the bathrooms. This is our last stop before the dock. We're going to be back in 5 minutes.
There you go. Yeah. But that's actually official right up because Willis, she acquired the rights. Their contract expired last year.
No, I kid. I went in it was still
Yeah. Daylight time. Never come back.
we're going later today, so yeah.
Enjoy.
All right, let's keep going a little bit more, y'all. A couple things I like to point out, especially with the sun kissing the water this way. Did you guys notice the color of the water? Beautiful green emerald color in this main branch. That's a natural thing. It's because all this water comes from Lake Michigan. The color itself is natural. It actually is attributed to an overpopulation of zebra mussels in Lake Michigan that eat so much algae that you're left with this green residual color. Follow-up question. Has anybody seen photos of Chicago during St. Patrick's? Yeah, very different green, right? Okay, so they dyed this main branch with green water dye. They actually use our boats, Shoreline boats, these ones, to do that. It's the Plumbers Union. They've been doing that for like 40 years. It's kind of cool. But the color lasts like 5 or 6 days, and then it disappears. However, I want to draw your attention to something funny. The river is supplied by water from that lake. That's not how rivers usually work. They usually go and be rivers all the way until they get to become lakes. Then they go to a bigger body of water. And that's not the case here. That's because the flow of our river has been artificially reversed. That had to happen in order to clean up the river. Think back, 1800s, Chicago, this place was growing and growing and growing. So nobody knew what to do with the trash. The easiest solution was to throw it in the river. The river would take the trash and turn it out to Lake. The problem was that we got our fresh water. And that we were contaminating it and poisoning ourselves. So, in the late 1800s, for 11 years, we worked with the Army Corps of Engineers to reverse the flow of the river, and we succeeded. The way to do that, kind of long-winded explanation, I can tell you that in one short story is that today, this water goes through the city and eventually connected to the Gulf of Mexico by means of the Mississippi. Okay, come with me. Left-hand side. Let's talk about the St. Regis. There's something I want to tell you guys. This building has 4 towers to it. Go to the last tower. What a good photo opportunity. I want you to look at floors 83 and 84. Maybe it's hard to see them because of the clouds right now. But if you do see them, you know what I'm talking about. Alright, do not overthink this. But tell me, what is different about those 2 floors in the last tower? They're open, they're empty, they don't have windows, those are blow-through floors. Just imagine that these clouds going through them right now, the only thing that's causing resistance on those floors is the elevator shaft. That's it. That's a brilliant way of dealing with wind. However, that was never part of the original design. Think about this. That building makes most of its money by selling private property, right? So, if you had to design a building that did the same thing, would you leave 2 floors of prime real estate unsellable? Probably not, right? But they had to do that here because their initial calculations to deal with wind were incorrect. And predicting how wind is going to affect your building precisely before you actually finish, it's kind of like an art and a science. Right? Now, they're going to be fine. They're going to recover all their investments. They're going to be great. The whole thing is a part hotel. The rest is by property. It's occupied up to like 78%. The St. Regis, just so you guys know, that brand of hotels is the hotel chain that introduced butler service in every single room that they have. It's that kind of luxury level. What do we want to live here? Okay, so a studio apartment at the St. Regis starts north of $1 million. That's a studio. The penthouse, the tallest floor in all of Chicago, is still on the market for $19.1. So hear me out. We all chip in a little bit for a mortgage, and collectively we take. Never mind. So it's fun. Pretty cool, though. Okay, a couple more cool things I want to show you. So look, straight ahead of you, great image of the Trump Tower, right? Second tallest building in the city. Why? Because that spire on the top. We know that spires are fake height. This guy, St. Regis, is actually taller from its roof to that one. But that spire counts. However, there is something very beautiful about the Trump Tower that I do like to talk about. It was made by Chicago architect Adrian Smith. He's famous for making the tallest buildings in the world over and over and over again. He's the architect that made the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. He did that in 2010. This was from 2009. And in a way, it anticipates what that Burj Khalifa would look like. And it's a central column with bundled tubes tied at different heights, right? Kind of a whole idea. Kind of nice. Chicago has these kinds of proud architecture in its history. So, over to your left, one of my favorite urban city photos, just because I like what it means. You have a triangle-shaped building, a rectangle. You're going to get Aqua Tower all lined up, all 3 of them. They're about 100 feet away from each other, but this is kind of what it's like to live in Chicago, in a nutshell. 3 different buildings, different generations, shapes, colors, sizes, all within about 100 feet of each other, but they still have room to breathe. This is the 3rd most populated city in America. There's almost 3 million people that call Chicago home. Almost another 8 million in the middle, in our suburbs. That's our Chicago flag, which is hard to see because it's blocked by a tree. Fortunately for you, your docent brought his own. I'm going to show it to you. This flag is everywhere. Sorry to those in the back, this is as tall as I can get to it. It's our city's flag. We have 3 white stripes, one for the north, the west, and south side, 2 blue stripes that represent one for the river and one for Lake Michigan. Every star you see here is an epic part of our history. The first one's from Fort Dearborn, the largest settlement we had, the first settlement we had, excuse me. The fire of 1871 and both world fairs that we hosted. This flag is everywhere. You're going to see it everywhere in the city and on the lawn of Chicago's forums. It just makes for a great tattoo. Folks, we come to the end of our tour. Let's recap very quickly. 2 things I need to tell you. Everybody's standing. Do me a favor. Take a seat. Hold on to that seat until the end of the tour. Next time you get to stand up is when I see you guys at the top of the ramp. I want you to hold on to your comments, questions, facts, stories. I want to hear all about it. And if you have anything for me, amazing. But everything happens at the top of the ramp. Cool? Good. Think about what we did here today. I asked you to ask yourselves, why are you here? Now, that's a big question, but what did you come to see? What did you come to feel? What motivates you to be here? Because there's a reason why you chose to spend your time here now with me instead of doing whatever else you could be doing. For me, I choose this every year because I'm inspired by the different kinds of beauty that we have in the river and the stories that the city has to tell. Now, Let me ask you this. Who's doing this for the first time tonight? Good, almost all of you. Remember this. You'll get another first chance to be on the river, to hear a tour, to start to understand what's around you. Look, you might not remember everything I said, and that's fine. I've been talking for 75 minutes. You might not even remember this handsome visage. That's okay. But there's a good chance that you're going to remember how you felt here. And when you leave, this might just be one of the highlights of your tour, of your whole time here. Usually people leave this place feeling positive. If that's you, good. If you feel positive now, good. Take that and do something with that. Because anything that comes from a place of positive creativity, we need more. Now that's all I got. So on behalf of Shoreline Sightseeing, on behalf of our captain, our crew, myself, I want to thank you guys. It's been my privilege to be your docent today. I've been Joe. And that is Chicago. Welcome back, everybody.
Everyone, please remain seated, guys, till the docking process is complete. Take this time, look around you, got all your personal belongings. If you have any trash, there will be a trash can at the bottom of the ramp as you exit. Your docent and guide, Joe, will be at the top of the ramp if you have any questions, anything. Don't forget to check out your boarding photos. They'll be at the top of the ramp as well.
Jerry. I'm so sorry. I was alive then, but I'm not responsible. Now, we are coming back up to the front door of Chicago here to see Michigan Avenue,